Welcome to the Citizens Reporter. I'm your host and editor, Diana Longgreen. Thank you for tuning in. The Citizens Reporter is brought to you live every Friday night right here out of SCC Studios in White Bear Lake. Now, the Citizens Reporter, we look at the week's past news that has occurred, mostly local. We have Mr. Mark Bradley, who is here this evening as a regular citizen reporter, and he has a number of items that he has found in the newspapers this week that he believes are of importance to our viewers and so that we can provide commentary. We also have film footage. We had one of our citizen reporters out there attending one of the St. Paul School District meetings, one of their work sessions, and we're going to be talking about their view of the Data Practices Act and the Open Meeting Law and providing data to the public at the public meetings. And I think you'll find that very fascinating and certainly an important insight into how the St. Paul School District looks at this particular law. And whether or not, as we find out, that they're not in compliance and they really just kind of shrug it off. Well, if our camera hadn't been there, nobody would even know that they're not in compliance with the law. And that's why it's so important the work that all of our volunteers do out in the field, because finding that kind of information out helps make it so that the viewers, you folks, that you understand why it's so important to be engaged as residents in our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mark Bradley, who's just chomping at the bit to talk about the news articles this week that are of importance from his perspective. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you very much. And what we really have to look at before we get off onto the subjects I have here is the one thing is that this is becoming predominantly across the board. It doesn't matter what city you're in, it doesn't matter what state you're in, it doesn't matter what school district or county you're in. More and more of them are taking the attitude that public meetings are not for the public, that what is for the public is a, how should I say it, a dog and pony show, which I've been talking about for a long time. And if you take a look at what St. Paul does is they show up and they have a full list of on their agenda of things that are supposed to be voted on. Well, they're supposed to be having a free and open debate which the public can actually be part of.
Well, and certainly that is our expectation
Right.
as active and engaged residents of the greater metropolitan area. We believe that the people of the community should have an opportunity at public meetings to be able to voice their thoughts, their comments, their viewpoint about what is being talked about by their elected or appointed officials. And you're right, Mr. Bradley, so oftentimes at these various meetings, they do not set aside any time for public comment. And the reason they don't is that by law, they don't have to, unless, of course, it's a public hearing and that there's laws in place that require that public hearing to be held. And so more and more you find that if they're not required by law to take that public comment, well, they opt out and say, well, we don't need to do that. You know, they can just send us an email. But of course, there's shortcomings to all of that. So you're right, Mr. Bradley. It's a closed system.
It is. But more importantly, if you take a look at it and think about it, if they're coming in with, nobody's arguing that maybe they can't get all the business done in a quorum like that, excuse me, but the public should have the right to actually hear them discuss the issues, pro and con to something. And what I find interesting is that the rules, as I understand them, and you being the mayor and being more well-versed on this, is that any time that they're supposed to be discussing something and there's more than two of them in the room, it's supposed to be a quorum, which means it should be in some way recorded and allowed for public
Well,
insight.
well, and I see what you're driving at. You're asking about, when is there a quorum and when, if there's going to be a public meeting and what are the notice requirements for the open meeting law. And of course, to determine that quorum of that public body, you have to first of all look at how many members are on that body. Because a quorum could be different from one body to the next.
I
so
guess,
it's the majority. If there's going to, like, say if it's a body of 5, a quorum would be 3. So that would be, in that case, that would be what a quorum would be the 3 of them. And if they're planning on having a meeting where there's anticipated to be a quorum of that body, they have to, if it's a not an emergency meeting, but it's a meeting, they have to notice it.
I guess, Diane, what I'm trying to make the point here, though, is that they can call each other separately and try to set up these things, but at some point they're supposed to be actually discussing the issues before they, if they're going to vote on them and they are going to do give a consent agenda.
But
they're supposed to actually at some point decide, and they should be having true communication between all the people. Otherwise, it's like most of these council people aren't even doing their job, their due diligence, and basically they're being given an assignment. They say, here's your assignment. Vote yes on this, vote no on that, vote yes on the other thing.
Right.
And my problem is that if they are actually arguing it before they take it to a city council in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Rosedale, or Maplewood, doesn't matter. It's the fact that when they're bringing in and saying, we got a consent here, agenda, and we figure there's no issues.
Well, see, and you're asking that a very good question, is you're wondering, okay, if
how do you get there?
If they have all these things on the consent agenda and they all agree, how did they come to that agreement? Now, you said something about, well, they can call each other. Well, no, actually, they can, if one calls one, that's okay. But if you have what's called a daisy chain communication, which is for the intent and purposes of basically trying to figure out how everybody falls on the issue, and that one talks to the next, to the next, to the next, and says, oh, gee whiz, well, so-and-so is voting this way, and da-de-da, and talks to the next one, that's called like a daisy chain.
Right.
That's actually in violation of the open meeting law.
And that's what I'm trying to get at.
So,
these seem to like...
Right, and so then what they do oftentimes is that they use what I view as a very
ambiguous?
Well, as a very sneaky loophole in the whole law, is that they can talk to, say for instance in Maplewood, because we have a city manager, they can actually talk to the city manager. And the city manager can actually not necessarily serve as the go-between between the council members, but that city manager can actually manipulate the city council members and call up one and find out how they view something. Then she can call up the other one and find out how they view something. And then she, of course, has the way that she wants the outcome to be. And so then once she can count her votes that she has on the council, if she doesn't have enough votes for the vote that she wants, she then has now the ammunition in her back pocket to know who is the weakest of those that isn't swinging her way. So then she can call that person up and persuade them why it's good for them to vote in a particular way. Then she can go ahead and talk to the other one, because if she finds out that that is a very good sales pitch, she can then go on to the next one. And now suddenly you've got, oh, we have everybody agreeing with the city manager that that's the way to go. And yet now the citizens and the residents of Maplewood in this example, they have no idea, as you said, how did the council come to their decision? Because when they get to the council meeting, they all already know how they're going to vote. And it isn't necessarily because they talk to each other, but because of using this very sneaky loophole of working with the city manager. And you see, that happens not just in Maplewood, but that happens in all these different governmental entities throughout the entire metropolitan area.
And
so
isn't
you
that
mentioned
really
St.
kind of a violation
Well,
of
it's-
their sworn duty as politicians that have been elected
us.
to
Well, it is
public office?
It is indeed a violation, from my point of view, of their fiduciary duty and their oath and their pledge to the people they represent. However, you can't sue them on it because there's no law that says that they have to, you know, have some greater altruistic view of how to be a politician.
Well, there was.
That's within their own heart. And they will always tell you, well, if you don't like the way that I do my job, just vote me out. But we all know that special interests and big money politics actually have control over that. And even if you wanted to vote them out, look at Kathy Juniman, you know, you can never vote her out because, well, gee whiz, there's entities out there that want to make sure she stays on there because she always votes for them.
And you got to take a look at all the issues that are coming up. That's why I've
Yes.
been. I wanted to bring this up before we got into these issues because I wanted to make the point that in some of these cases we're not even talking about politicians. We're talking about governmental individuals who are making decisions for us outside of the hearing area,
And
which should be
outside-
determined in some type of quorum before it ever gets to the point it's at.
Right, and they're outside of the elected process.
Right.
That they're administrative, that they've been appointed. And so the regular resident and citizen, they really don't have any way to have checks and balances against those who are appointed or who are administrators.
Now, I'm going to start with, before I get to these issues here, I wanted to
Yes.
start with one thing that I was going to use as a point application. It was in the May 1st, May Day Pioneer Press Sunday paper. And when we are talking about, I'm one of the white people that feels that actually they should be taking and have a hearing on these two police officers. I think we should be actually having a hearing on not just the police officers, but the educational facility we have here and the actual whole training system that is in all cities.
And
deals.
these police officers you're talking about, are they the Minneapolis ones or?
Well, it's all of them actually,
all of them,
because so you
okay.
got to understand that number one, we do not have an accepted line for training and application that has been set up for officers. We're cherry picking officers from everywhere. These two officers were not even from Minnesota, trained in Minnesota. These were officers that came from another area and left their deals. Maybe this was a better pay. I have no idea. But to relocate from, well, one was down in San Diego. It was beautiful weather, and it isn't that expensive. The other one was from L.A. Well, that's more expensive. But I'll tell you, who in the right mind would take and go to a smaller police force that pays less unless Minneapolis actually pays more? I don't know what the deal here is. So I can't really see where and why they came here for any reason. But why they came here is questionable at best. But what I was going to try to make the point is most of us that are of the baby boom have gotten our jobs, and we were either got to retirement, got close to retirement, and there are some of the white baby boomers that are also feeling the pain, just as the minorities are feeling it at this point.
You know, and here's something that maybe our viewers haven't heard of yet, and I don't know if it was in reported in any of the newspapers very clearly, but for instance, like Cargill, they're based here in Minnesota.
Yep.
And certainly we hear a lot of during the presidential election about you've got these major corporations that are sending off their divisions off to other countries. Well, Cargill is going to still stay with its headquarters here, from what I understand, keep their headquarters here in Minnesota. but they have a couple of their internal divisions that they're actually going to be having taken care of by people in a different country.
Oh, yeah.
And like human resources and accounting. And so it's sort of like, okay, and some of the people who are being laid off, who are being given packages, well, they're like in the age range of, well, like 59 years old. Well, you know, even though there's not supposed to be age discrimination, anybody who has been in the position where they're over 50 years old and they find themselves in the position of having to find a new full-time employment that's at a comparable pay to what they have to leave, know that it is a tough job trying to find something comparable, either in work or in pay or in how far you have to drive. There are a lot of concerns in all of that, and yet here we, you know, here's another example of that, and I know Mr. Bradley,
Well,
you know that
yeah.
we've talked about this before on this program, but it kind of dovetails right into what you're talking about.
Right.
Is that, you know, when you're looking at that job market here in Minnesota, you know, you look at what it was in past years, and now you look at what it is today, and jobs aren't necessarily the same today as they were a few years ago.
Well, I think this Sunday paper will kind of make it more self-evident to all the people that are listening here. And the reason I wanted to take it and make it a point was that in 1980, we were coming close to parity, an equity between the races, as it were, because there was enough jobs. There's been so many jobs shipped offshore that right now...
And in manufacturing type of jobs too, right?
Yeah, what we're talking about, just as their family income. So this makes it very simple. We're not talking about just a factory. We can be talking about office and everything here. But we're talking about how it reflected on the different races, as it were. In 1980, they were at, the minorities were at $40,036 for a normal family of four. And the white income was at $58,368. Obviously, there was a little difference where it was higher for the whites rather than for the minorities. But now, let's take a look what's happening in 2014. Because of so many jobs have been moved offshore, and because of its last hired, first fired is what they call it. And many of the minorities were hired late in there because of discrimination. We all know it was there. And we had to, at that time, follow discrimination laws. What nobody's really realizing right now is because of they haven't been obligated to follow it because of they've been throwing everybody out of work. It's mostly the family households in the minorities are at $27,015, which is us almost having their family income. Could you imagine living 30 years ago, because that's what we're really talking about, 1980, and now we're at 2016, so we're actually 35 years ago, that you had the same income. Now all of a sudden they've cut your income in half. And how happy would you be? And how would you feel in a world that all of a sudden is cutting everything out from underneath your feet? And this is what I'm trying to get across to the public out there. When we're trying to make the outcry that they don't have any issues at all, and this doesn't seem right. It is in a lot more ways than we realize.
And it's a very complicated issue because, yes, there's a lot of employment that has gone offshore, but I think there's also been quite a few changes in public policy that have occurred, whether or not it's at the local, state, or federal level, that for whatever reason, elected officials decided that they made certain laws, made certain policies, and those policies, those laws, then had unintended consequences. One, of course, jobs going offshore. also unintended consequences of maybe not putting more money into research so that we can be competitive with the rest of the world.
I will actually take a contention with that it's unintentioned, because I really look at it as, if you really take a look at the people who maneuver the money and the power, they haven't taken any losses at all. And really, they were the ones who looked at it and said, how can we scrape a little bit more money off of everybody's belly? And basically, that's what they did, is they started to say, well, geez, we can move these offshore. It wasn't because the products weren't good. It wasn't because the products weren't selling. In fact, in some ways, they've even put their own stock and their own businesses at risk, because take what's happening at China. China's actually been able to rebuild their country on the patents and products of American design, and they're actually making them in China now, but because they're also making their own Chinese product in contention with that American product, and they could sell it for less. They are selling it for less and beating the American product, and nobody wants to buy it anymore because it isn't as reliable, because the Chinese are throwing all their money at their own factories.
Right. Now, I understand that we have a caller on the line, so let's get our caller out here and see what's on their mind. Hello.
Mark Bradley,
Yes.
Mayor Longbridge. Hey, I noticed that at the state level, the state legislature, they came out. Didn't they say they were going to spend $1.5 billion to create jobs? $1.5 billion.
Right.
And they were going to create over 39,000 jobs. Now, do you know how is that figured? How do they calculate it? What is the equation where they get 1.5 billion and they get 39,000 jobs? Is that just 1.5 billion divided by 39,000?
No.
Or how do they make up that number? How do they know it's not 35,000 jobs or 1,000 jobs? And the other question I have you for Mark Bradley. So are those 39,000 new jobs that they're going to spend 1.5 billion on? Are those going to be 39,000 people who haven't been employed before that are going to be employed, or is that just so that the same people will keep their jobs? You know, how does that work, and how do they get away with making these big numbers? Like, is it just pulled out of the air, or is there an equation? Because that was the front page of the paper I see. 1.5 billion is going to create over 39,000 jobs. Thank you.
And I did bring that paper with me, so yes.
Excellent. Well, and Mr. Bradley, I'm going to let you answer that. And I also, actually, we have another one of our volunteer reporters who dug into that question a little bit. So, Mr. Bradley, you go ahead and answer your part as I find the research that our other reporter found also on this question, because it poses a very important question, because we hear this type of rhetoric not just now, but we hear it all the time.
Well, it's for the soccer stadium, we're here for the football stadium, we're here for light rail.
Or to justify the tax increment financing for 3M in Maplewood. We heard it then even. So, Mr. Bradley, go ahead.
Well, first of all, when we're looking at any type of investment at all, when you start working, and that's why I've been talking about that, I've been saying there's been $20 billion invested in Minneapolis by itself. And that number is taken by the fact that what you're looking at is the costs of actually putting in the lines and all that. But when we're talking about the jobs that are being situated off of, and that there's going to be actually more financing that's going to be set up from it, is when you have to buy the materials to put in railing, and you have to have laborers putting those rails down for light rail. If you have to buy the seats for the stadium, you're going to have people that are going to be hired to put those seats in. They may be temporary jobs, but they are jobs that are there. So that's why Minneapolis has got such a stellar image across the United States and the world for being so industrious, because the fact is so much money has gone into it and reconstructing it. And as we're reconstructing, remember, people who otherwise would have probably not had a job and not wanted to go after working, are given a job there because of the fact is they have to hire them because there's nobody else left in their area. But at the same time, it's hurting the rest of the state when you do this type of stuff, because the fact is when you aim it at one specific area and you drain it from everywhere else, when you're not taking a look at from, they used to say, doing the most good. You can spend $100 on a boat with a hole in it. And if it sinks right away, you don't have anything. But if you buy a boat and you fish off of it, and you're able to sell maybe $100 a week on that boat, and you've got 52 weeks in a year, that means you've got probably about $5,200 off of that boat. Now, that's how they do their mathematics. They say, okay, if we're going to put somebody to work, we see how many we can put to work, and we're going to use it in the broadest sense of the word.
Well, and I think you're right there, Mr. Bradley. It's a very broad description.
Right.
And because they never talk about the man hours in particular, or in talking about it in quantifiable terms, and that's really where you have to use that analytical thinking when they're saying, okay, how many jobs? Well, it's first of all,
it's jobs to debt, though. We got to look at it. Nobody does do that, and that's the sad part about it. Is when we're talking about that, and we got to remember this is a number that is quantified by the fact that the numbers I've done on my own adding, and you can do it too by going in and doing your own adding and compare it with mine and see how close I am to that $20 billion. We have a $2 billion Viking Stadium that's there. Nobody's contesting that. We're not contesting that it was a $2 billion Hiawatha line that was first put in. And we've now got about $1 million green line that's supposed to be going down Midway. Now, the problem we're looking at is that every time they make these commitments, it's a lot of money going in, but it's a lot of debt that the state's incurring that somebody has to say, okay, now how are we going to be able to get rid of it? And the problem is that right now, because we can't sell any of the property around there because it's owned by other people, and we can't tax it any higher because of a lot of times we're using this increment finance to build the buildings around those various sites we're talking about. There is no tax base to grab any money to pay off the initial debt. So what we've got is a $20 billion debt that's going to come due very soon, and it's going to be all of us taxpayers of the state they're looking at.
Right, and I think the point, too, that the caller was bringing up is that there really is a difference, and you brought this up, too, is that there's such a thing as, looking at jobs as temporary jobs, or you're looking at long-term, permanent, sustainable jobs where you know that somebody's going to have a job that as long as they perform their job well, that they're going to be going to work, Monday through Friday, and it's going to be consistent over and over and over again, versus, okay, once the project is done, now they're looking for a new project. Now, I have up here on the screen, on the computer screen, I actually have the email in response to one of our volunteer reporters who saw this and was asking the same questions you were asking, Mr. Bradley, talking about, well, really, when you're talking about how many jobs that this bonding bill is supposed to bring, I mean, how did you arrive at those, and how'd you get that? Well, here's what they say. Well, first of all, it says, thanks for contacting Senator Scalise's office about jobs created by the bonding bill. I'd like to mention that the House hasn't yet released a bonding bill, and da-dee-da-dee-da. But it says, as for the itemized list of jobs created, the jobs in the 39,000 figure are based on contract bids, mostly placed by private construction company. So the number does not refer specifically to net positions created, although some contractors may hire new employees for larger projects. So in essence, this isn't creating new jobs at all. This is based upon the fact that when the contractors are bidding, they say, well, we will be using 200 of our employees to do this job. What they're really saying is that they're only just counting up the number of employees of other people's businesses that are going to work on that project. Now, conceivably, they could argue, well, without this project, those people will be laid off, but we can't necessarily say that.
You've got to realize, too, that in many cases, these aren't even Minnesotans we're talking about. When we're talking about those are jobs because of these are national contractors. When we're talking about a big building being constructed, a highway being constructed, or even a stadium being constructed. Now, when we know that Crouse Anderson is local, but remember, they also are in a lot of different areas, and when they're talking about big constructions, they do a lot more out in LA. So we don't have the guarantee that all the people that are being hired that are Crouse Anderson even, that are a Minnesota company, are going to be Minnesotans that are going to be working on this project when it was a dome stadium.
That's right. So we are bonding and taking out these bonding bills that are going to produce jobs
for people in California.
There you go. And now let's take a look at this email, because now it also shows you another little wrinkle in all of this. It says another project in the area, $5.5 million, is a renovation of the welding lab at Century College and improvements to other technology centers at the college. I recommend calling Century directly, and they would have a better idea of whether their contractors are hiring for the bonding projects. So you see, when they give you that figure, they really don't even have the data to be able to back it up. So here they are referring our reporter, to Century College, because they actually can tell you whether or not if their contractors are going to be hiring new people, or if they're just basically, this is just the same people that they already hire anyway. So isn't that fascinating? And again, this is not reported in the newspaper article. They just use, how many jobs it would be, without going that extra depth as our reporters, volunteer reporters here on the Citizens Reporter.
Now I got two papers that I'd like to bring up that will give you, maybe I'm being Chicken Little on this, but I don't think so. And what I wanted to point out is that we also mentioned about the Saints Stadium that's already been built, and now we're going to have the soccer stadium. Well, we know that Saints Stadium has been very successful for quite a few years, so I'm happy for them. I'm happy they've got the new stadium. I'm not going to throw any rocks at that one. But I'm going to throw all kinds of rocks at the soccer stadium because of, as we've discussed before, and I'll state it again, we have never had a soccer team that stayed over about 6 to 10 years. Because I haven't checked each of the teams separately, and we've had about 7 of them over the period of time. It's a matter that we've got to take a look at. Well, we've also had quite a few different semi-pro teams that have come in here, and like the Pipers used to play in the Hippodrome when I was a kid. So you've got teams that come in here, and really because of we're being committed to a structure for a certain long-term period, we've got to ask the cost and how it's going to be defrayed, especially in a city that does not have a strong and vigorous commercial and a industrial area. Minneapolis has kept most of its vital large corporations. St. Paul has lost almost all of its large corporations. Either they exited it completely or they went across the river, like all the banks, being the little Chicken Littles they are, and ran away from St. Paul. Even though they have the big buildings over here, they've abandoned them for Minneapolis. And what you really have here is a non-commitment, but then they're spending all of our money to build projects that don't make any sense, like that soccer stadium. If we're looking at, we've got to sign a contract that says that stadium's going to cost us, we're going to take a loan out for 50 years. You're going to buy a car that's only going to last 2 years, but you're going to take out a loan that's going to last you for the whole rest of your life. The day you die, you're still going to be paying on that daggone car.
Yeah.
That's what they're telling you here. And here we've got this idiot river walk. The big plans for the river. Well, I've got plans for the river, and I've been trying to point them out to you. If you're realistic and say, okay, what can make good sense, and how can we do it without spending a lot of money? We've already done some of the spending, and it's already money that we can't really recuperate either. We've torn down a police station. It was actually an incarcerated, the Ramsey County Detention Center, as it's called.
That's right.
And then its West Publishing was torn down. Now, I understand that they want to have something vital in there, but until some guy comes along with a great plan, I mean a great plan where he's going to put up his own money, because it is Riverview. And if you get Riverview and you've got that type of acreage, you should be able to put the money up. Now, I've been saying that if we're looking at it, here's this open land that's there anyway, and we're going to have all the riverboats landing right by that property. Wouldn't it be great if we could do what Europe does and have those gardens? I mean, farmers markets. Have that farmers market as the people are coming off when they're either on a paddle wheeler or on these new riverboats that are going to be put on by Viking in the next couple of years. They're talking about, we're looking at as many as 7 boats that are going to be coming up here. That's kind of impressive. But for every one of us that happens to be going, there's going to be enough parking around there that we should be able to park on that side and shop that. And it's just the people who would be coming from St. Paul that live in the city that would have to have an access, which would be just a portal. Just a little tunnel going underneath there so they could get to the farmer's market on the river. Now, to me, that's, how much did it cost us to do that? Well, basically, we already tore down the buildings. All we have to do is move the stalls if we're going to move the farmer's market.
Right, yeah, because Ramsey County has already invested all that money in the demolition and the, you know, the work of that, and we've covered that on previous programs here on these channels. But how much is that? That's Riverwalk, as they call it.
Exactly. It's supposed to be 2.5 miles, if I read right. 2.5 miles. And you got to figure, it's crawling up the side of a cliff. The cliffs cave every so often, and it's sandstone. So you got to make sure it's very structurally sound. And my point is, when we're looking at that, and then, of course, their plan is, let's put the farmer's market over on top of the cliff so everybody can fall off the cliff. Hey, that's right. We can have, one thing we can do is we can get those guys with, you know, with the aeronautical wings that they can put on their back, and they can jump off the cliffs, and we can have, what is that, skydiving deals with those kites.
There you go. Now that actually, that you could have that in conjunction with the riverboats.
Oh yeah. But if you understand, I'm being facetious.
That's right, exactly. Well, I am too, because certainly there's not going to be enough of a market for the entertainment theme.
Well, I wanted to say that in case somebody thought I was being serious.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
But like I said, that's why I wanted to point out these two things here. Here you've got a city that's really desperately in need of revitalization. Now, I've been talking about that railroad track that should be used.
Well, well, that's right, and certainly you've got that whole bluff area. When you're thinking about, you know, what could it be used for? Well, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, it would be great that you have some type of entity that's going to help create good paying sustainable jobs down in St. Paul, because then people will have a reason to come to St. Paul. That's part of the reason why a lot of St. Paul has, you know, what was the commercial base there has actually moved out, was because they don't have enough customers, or there isn't the foot traffic. There's a lot of reasons why things have changed in St. Paul and it's gone to Minneapolis, but a lot of it has to do with...
But it's part of the commitment of the business group that's there.
Right.
And since Minneapolis had that big commitment, they've been eating everything. It's like been Pac-Man compared to every other city.
But what they could be doing with that whole entire area there is that I think that St. Paul and Ramsey County Board, that they've really kind of had this look to thinking that they were going to put all these condominiums. I mean, that was originally one of the ideas. We're going to have a bunch of condominiums there. Well, I don't know that people necessarily are going to live there if they don't have employment close by.
That's the problem.
And so that whole area there the way that it's facing, the direction it's facing, I just think it would be a good location that you could put in a whole complex that would be considered a business incubator, and you could even put in businesses there that are based upon the use of hydroponics and solar, and a lot of those types of forward-looking industries that are looking more towards using solar power, that are using hydroponics, that are ways that we can use our space more efficiently, that are good paying jobs. I was just listening to a program where they were talking about in another state that a factory that is no longer a factory because the jobs have gone somewhere else, but the building remains, and that they've been able to convert that to a hydroponic area of growing plants, and I know that we can
That's
do
in Detroit,
more of
but
that
also
now.
we have it in St. Paul over at the 3M site.
Right, but what I'm saying is that it is and can be a very lucrative model, because in this particular community that this program was about in another state, they've been able to bring good paying jobs to that community that lost jobs, and they are able to market their product in a way that they can make ends meet, that they can pay their workers a good wage. And I'm just thinking, if you've got this whole area along the cliffs there, more people would want to buy condominiums or live downtown St. Paul if they actually had their employment not too far away. And on the cliffs there, you've got the sun, so you've got the solar, you could do the hydroponics, you could do this if you had a forward-looking vision rather than just thinking, oh, we're just going to put in a bunch of housing. Housing and stadiums, they will not build a community if you do not have jobs.
Now, we have to say that St. Paul is actually doing an industrious effort on bringing some businesses back to St. Paul. They're going to hand out squeegees and dirty rags to all the indigents that happen to be going into the new Catholic services that St. Paul has now gotten for funding. It's going to be 200 units, very small units, so maybe one or two people can stay in a unit, but it's going to be downtown St. Paul, which to me, here's a city that's just struggling to survive, and now you're going to put 200 people with no jobs, no future, and no way of getting to a job from where they are.
Well, that's right. I mean, again, you know, we're not against, you know, having homeless shelters, but you're right. They have to be where they are not far from potential employment,
right,
that they're not far from a reasonably priced grocery store, that they have to be close to transportation, because that's all part of getting assimilated back into the community, is that you need to be able to be in a location that makes it easier for you to get your groceries, get that job, and have transportation. And now I think St. Paul probably will say, well, we've got the transportation covered. Oh, well, you probably do. But where's the employment? Where's the jobs?
That's right.
And in downtown St. Paul, I know there's a grocery store, but is it the most affordable grocery store for the amount of, you know, for the food? So, you know, that's always a big question. So now we're getting to we've got about 15 minutes left of our program, and we certainly want to make sure that we show film footage that our reporter was out at the St. Paul school board meeting. It was just a little while ago, a couple days ago, and it was actually a work session. So in the St. Paul School District, their work sessions, their executive meetings of the board with their administrators, they do not cablecast those. So the only way that you will know what's going on at these public meetings is if you show up and you sit there and you listen to it, or an organization such as ours has volunteer reporters who go out and film it. So one of the first things that our reporter noticed is that while they had an agenda out for the public, they did not have a packet of the information that the school board members were reviewing and discussing at their meeting. So let's take a look at this first clip when I believe our reporter is asking one of the school board members about this at the end of the meeting.
Hey, you can turn it off now.
Well, the issue is, I thought that Richard was going to say the law is required to have the information out there to discuss and items of public record. And John, I didn't say anything about policy. I think that was a misdirection. Maybe I don't know that.
Well, on the work, on that, not on that one maybe, but on the other one, on the one that went out, I think it said work session dealing with policies.
I'm thinking, this board, I mean, I understand they don't want to do stuff for the public eye, but you gotta try to at least do the state law. I mean, the state law says you gotta have the information, one copy of the information out for the public.
Just give me a call, Christy. And, you know, I'm Mr. Policy. I'm also known as Johnny Transparency. Call me up weekend. I gotta go.
I'm just trying.
So that, of course, is Mr. Broderick, and he is a longtime member of the St. Paul School Board. Now, his response is, well, just brushes it off. I'm Mr. Policy, Mr. Transparency. Just call me. No, that doesn't answer the question as to why didn't you have a packet of the materials out for the public to inspect at a public meeting as is required under state law. Well, let's take a look at how the next person responds to this same question. Oh, and by the way, you noticed at the beginning of the clip, he was telling our reporter, oh, you can turn that off now. Well, you see, all of these things that you're seeing right now that we're showing you, all occurred after the meeting. And so when you're a reporter out there in the field, it's important to keep your camera on after the meeting is concluded, because your job as a reporter doesn't end just because the meeting did. So let's take a look at our next clip.
Alice, I want to report to you also that there was not copies of the items that you guys were discussing out here. And I thought, in doing that, doing on your agenda, did not list specifically the policy we were discussing. You should have made that public. That is, you know, kind of disinformation.
This wasn't part of the COB meeting, this was part of the work session, so those things don't happen.
You have a separate agenda for the work session? Because on the work session, all it says work session.
As we just had.
Okay, but it didn't have any discussion of policies that you were discussing. And the information that all the board members had in front of them, I was looking for a copy of that. Is there a copy out? I mean, that's a state law, I guess, according to Richard Newmaster.
If you're part of the media, you can make a data request, and so our policy is up online, and so you can make that data request.
Yeah, yes, I'm a citizen for news. But you do not believe you have to have information out for the public or for the media? That's your belief? That you do not
I don't know
have
about my belief, but I know that this was a work session, and
okay, work sessions
is informal, and it's.
So first of all, she says, well, you're a member of the media, you can get it through the data practices. Well, sure, a member of the media can get it through the Data Practices Act, but you know, members of the public can get it through the Data Practices Act. The media is not just special somehow, and they are more privy to the data than the regular public is. So that's sort of misleading to say that, oh, you're a member of the media, you can get a copy of it. And then she goes on to say, well, this was an informal meeting, implying that because it's informal somehow, they don't need to have the packet of information available for the public. Well, these are all misguided and misdirected. Certainly ways trying to alleviate the fact that they disobeyed the law.
Well, also when you take a look at it, you got to realize that they did have to have a plan, and they had to have it written up so all of the members that were showing up would have some type of idea of what they were supposed to be discussing. So they did have a package for themselves.
That's right.
And that's why when they're saying they don't have it, it's really a lie because they did have an agenda. They just did not reprint it for the public.
That's right. They had a packet of information because each one of those school board members were looking at the papers, and they had it, but the public did not. So let's take a look at our next clip and see what happens here.
Should the agenda for the work session have been posted and the materials made available to everyone?
One copy out to the media and any public citizen who wants to be here. The board members had all kinds of data in front of them, and there was not one available. And I checked the internet, and most of it wasn't on the internet either, so.
Okay,
it was
well,
all-
I can inquire for you. Typically, if we have extras of it, we do give it to the media, but I can inquire for you.
Who are you going to inquire of?
With my general counsel.
Which person is that?
Nancy
specifically?
Cameron is her name. She's the
So
general
Nancy
counsel.
Cameron is the decider on that.
I'm going to consult with her,
Okay.
okay? And
Well, I just want to know who
I'll-
the decider is. I mean, because Nancy has made the decision that it's not about,
I
you've
didn't-
never had any discussion of this, and I guess you are
We've never
the,
had any discussion about what.
well, the information that needs to be available for the public and for the media at one of these work sessions, because this, lady here told me that it's a work session, so when the board meets in a work session, information that the board is discussing does not need to be, one copy does not need to be available for the public.
Okay, well, I don't have that. I need to get an official opinion on that.
So okay, so now we're talking. We've gone up a step in the ladder, the rungs of the ladder of authority, and so now she says, "Well, I guess I got to go ask our legal counsel about whether or not we got to have a packet out for the public." And yet, you see, they should all know what the requirements are for the open meeting law and the requirement of having public data out for the public. But so seldom does the public ever go to these particular meetings because of the timing of them and where they've got them, that the public very seldom ever exercises the rights they have. And so these elected officials and administrators can get away with actually not setting anything out for the public because they've never been challenged on the fact that they don't comply. But let's continue with our clip because this is getting a little uncomfortable for the administrators, and they got to figure out how they're going to get disengaged from this reporter who's letting them know that they're not in compliance with the open meeting law.
The
But,
general counsel.
okay, so, I mean, you guys have been meeting for a long time. You've never had it available, apparently. You've never had this,
I don't know if we can say
Well, I
that
would
it
not-
has ever been
okay,
or
you know
never
what?
been, but you've got your
If
response.
you're trying to get me to respond in a particular way, I'm
no,
not
I just
going
want to know
to
what
do
your
that.
policy is on
Well,
it.
and you've got your response.
Because I know what the state law is.
Okay,
And,
all right.
And so your policy is what? You're going to consult because you don't know. You're not aware of it.
Okay, we've responded to your questions multiple times, and that's enough. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Well, we've answered all of your questions sufficiently and completely, and have a good day. And you see how the other gentleman came in the room in order to give solidarity and help muscle out the reporter out of the room so that they could all extract themselves and get on out of that very uncomfortable position. Well, it'll be fascinating to find out whether or not their legal counsel actually gives them an opinion which is consistent with the view they want to express or consistent with the law. So I guess we'll look into that as citizen reporters and get back to you as soon as we know. Now, as I mentioned, now there are things that sometimes happen after those meetings that's fascinating to see that if you turned off your camera, you would never know occurred. So let's take a look at our next clip and find out what our reporter caught on film.
Speaking of social media, children today. It's for a better picture. But they posted it because it was late.
Now, of course, you may not think that that seems so fascinating at all. It's just two people sitting in the back corner after the meeting, taking a conversation, correct? Well, that could be what it is, or maybe it's something different. Now, the lady is one of the new school board members that just recently, I understand, is new to the board. Mary, I don't know what her last name is, but anyway, Mary. And of course, we saw a clip of her earlier not knowing whether or not a packet had to be out for the public under the open meeting law. But that gentleman that she was sitting with, it's my understanding from people that I've talked to, that that is one of the union representatives. So after the meeting, you've got a member of one of the unions busy chit-chatting and talking very, well, I think that they were having a thoughtful conversation about a topic of some kind, but talking with that school board member. Now, we do not have this clip tonight, but one of the other issues that came up during this school board meeting was talking about the budget and the budget shortfalls. And one of the school board members, Mr. Broderick, he brought up the issue that we may have to take austerity measures. We may have to freeze salaries. And he turned in his chair and he looked specifically at the union guy and he said, you know, we need to take a look at how we're spending our money and what our budget is. Because if we don't take austerity measures, we're going to be in a world of hurt, and maybe I'll be around for the next time around, or maybe I won't. Because one of the worst things a school board member could be talking about is freezing salaries. So here we are after the meeting having a union representative in a huddle with one of the other school board members. Now, isn't that fascinating? So I would like to have been a little birdie in his pocket so I could have heard what they were talking about. Now, let's take a look at our last clip of what we saw after the meeting. Go ahead.
We actually have places where there's recycling. Oh, and there is one in our room. I remember. There's one in our room.
Now, what's so fascinating and ironic about that? Well, there is such a heavy focus and emphasis on recycling today. Recycling in our homes, all of us must be recycling, businesses must be recycling, and yet here we have our governmental entity that they don't even have a recycling bin in their meeting themselves. So we have governmental entities dictating about recycling, which I certainly support recycling. However, when you've got your governmental entities not even following what all of the rest are doing, you've got a problem.
I've got one story I'd like to sneak in here at the very end.
And we have 30 seconds.
Okay, well, what happens to be is that Enbridge is announcing they're going to be actually pressurizing the pipelines that are already running under the headwaters of the Mississippi. In other words, what it really is they're going to take the existing ones and put more oil in them per minute, which means that we could have leaks and stuff like that.
Right.
If they're going to do it, and the state's supposed to be responsible for this, I feel that the state should actually ask them to empty the lines and do a pressure test before they do that, and they should have to exceed it to a certain level over that.
And that's something our legislators, elected officials, could create public policy to make that happen.
Exactly.
That's right. Well, thank you, Mr. Bradley, for that late breaking news, and I hope our viewers enjoyed all of our program this evening. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.